I am proud to welcome you to the University Museum's 50th anniversary kickoff. Over the course of the 50 years, we have had one constant, Lynette Pohlman. A few years ago, I approached Lynette about making a video. She said, no way. But she is a curator at heart, and we are able to chronicle where we started, where we are, and where we're going in the future. I'd like to thank all of you who supported us and were part of this video. So please sit back and enjoy the rest of this year as our celebration continues. Thank you.
Really good art has many stories that are relevant over time.
This is the most wonderful, art-inspiring place.
There's an art to all of this.
Art and beauty reaches down into education and connects students.
Visual literacy is very powerful.
Education and art together. It's very much part of who we are.
Everywhere you look on this campus, there's something that is truly unique and beautiful.
I believe every day the university museums impact our community.
I think that's the tipping point, and it compels them to move forward.
We have a distinctive and distinguished artistic legacy, and it must not be forgotten. Iowa State has a distinctive artistic heritage. Many people do not associate culture and artistic accomplishment with the state of Iowa. And that's a mistake.
I believe every day the university museums impact our community. The opportunity for art to be there as just a moment of joy, to the opportunity for it to be included in the curriculum, to be part of an exhibition with a faculty member, to be an important place where discussions are held and different perspectives are shared. The museum's work is impactful.
It is really university-wide, that sense of beauty that inspires and that evokes emotion and that brings emotion with intellectual understanding really is what we're about. It's the Farmhouse Museum, which focuses on Iowa State's founding from 1860 to 1910. It's the Brunnier Art Museum, which focuses on the decorative and fine arts across the ages with temporary and permanent collections. The Art on Campus collection is over 2,700 public works of art located over 1,900 acres, which is to give voice and articulation to all of the departments that we have on campus. The Christian Petersen Art Museum was established to amplify not only Peterson's legacy, but also to showcase new public artists that are coming to our campus. The Anderson Sculpture Garden is to magnify the voice of public art. Public art is so predominant on this campus, and it is a daily learning opportunity that students can have as much as they want, literally each and every day.
We have the largest public art display in the country. So we've always had that recognition aspect of it. Our museums are state-of-the-art. I mean, we bring in exhibits that not many can challenge us, but what we've always seen is that our exhibits and our public art has been used in different ways by the university.
The museums fill out a dimension of Iowa State being a true university in the context of broad programs. And I think it turns out people interested in the sciences, engineers and others, if you look at many of their backgrounds, the arts and music and all that, fit into that kind of setting. And, one of the programs is visual learning. So if you're in the design programs and these other fields, it contributes to their education. And I think to be a well-rounded person, you need these broader contexts.
According to research, if you are a sighted person, 80% of what you will learn in life is through visual interpretation, Whether you're looking into a petri dish, a landscape, symbols like chemistry or mathematics, you are doing interpretation. So visual literacy, if you're looking at a painting or a sculpture, it teaches you critical thinking skills as well as communication skills. And those are transferred to all disciplines. That's why the museum program is targeted to all colleges.
The interpretation of art in those various kinds of curriculum is very exhilarating, and it brings a uniqueness to the kind of education that students have here. And it's the kind of education that will help them regardless of whatever career they go into, whatever their life commitments are. That understanding of what art and what it communicates to them can be very beneficial in their lives.
The advancement of art on this campus so enriches the learning opportunity for these students to be exposed to it and to be enriched by it, that, I mean, I was just blown away by the amount of art on this campus.
Thousands of people walk on that sidewalk through the Anderson Sculpture Garden every day, and I've seen it grow and grow each year, which is really fabulous.
Being in an educational institution, being in a university, art and museums have a very important function of being there to help students think differently, to open their minds, to inspire them to look at their world differently and how they are learning and how art can inform what they do every day. It will help them maybe look at things differently. And for me, that's both inspirational and educational, right? Because it changes how you might view your world, but it also changes how you might learn in the future.
When you walk into this university through the lens of some of the people that I painted in my first 20 portraits at the State Fair, and I was working with some of the scientists, and I was working with some of the engineers. I mean, I was painting their portraits, right? That was just fascinating, just fascinating. It changed my perspective about what people are trying to do in institutions like Iowa State University, right? Like in a university setting. People are really, I feel, trying in their way from the lens that they're looking at the world through to make it a better place. And I think here, because you find yourself caring about people and feeling cared for, you want to make it a better place for people.
A beautiful campus, as said in 1858 by the founding Board of Education. Iowa State will be a beautiful campus to inspire learning. End of statement. And that is what it does. It inspires learning. That grows out of a 19th century concept of the city beautiful, the garden city concept, and the parks then allowed people a better quality of life if they're surrounded by beauty. It's mental health, but it is also inspiring learning.
This university was started as the Iowa Agricultural School and Model Farm by the Iowa legislature. So it was established in 1858. Along comes the Morrill Act a few years later, and it was to designate each state for having the opportunity to sell land, federal land, in order to build a university that was to educate the masses. And the difference was it was practical education as well as liberal. And many people don't think about that. The practical education that students get here was from our very beginnings. And that's why Iowa was the first state to step up and say, we want to have a land grant university, and we already have the Iowa Agricultural College here. So that would make a great connection.
The first museum was founded in Old Main, or Maine as it was known at the time. And it was a museum because museums are part of the research of any university. Now, it had natural history museum associated with it, and the collections were not art, but it was part of the core founding of this university, which leads to its idea of curiosity and as well as the building of knowledge based on original sources. And that's where the visual literacy came into formulation as a plan.
Prior to the 1930s, most Americans, unless they lived in an urban area, would not have been able to have much access to works of art. And one of the goals of the New Deal was to bring people into contact with works of art and artists. It was also a recognition that in a culture, artists have a very important role to play in looking at who we are and then expressing those ideals back to us.
Anston Marston said it very good. He was Dean of Engineering, and he said, this is in the 1930s, Iowa State has some of the smartest engineers in the world, but if the engineers don't know what the human problems are to solve, they're not effective, they're not impactful. So he started in 1934 the first art appreciation class for engineers, and it was that idea that he wanted his engineers to be very smart and impactful in their science, but also to understand the human condition. And he was one of the early deans that was very impactful in organizing the fine arts on campus. And that led, among other things, to Raymond Hughes, the president of the time, hiring Christian Petersen and Grant Wood to do site-specific public art.
So Christian Petersen was able to join one of these New Deal art programs. It was called the Public Works of Art Project. And he was working with Grant Wood over at Iowa City. But President Hughes felt very strongly that Iowa State needed to have a, shall we call it, an aesthetic component about life here. Christian Petersen was the first artist in residence in the state of Iowa. In fact, Christian Petersen, now we know, was the first artist in residence at an American university or college. So that is important.
Christian Petersen, the studio originally was in the College of Veterinary Medicine in what was designed to be, animal clinic space. And this was all before we had a College of Design, and the programs kind of emerged from that.
And so we have to give credit to President Hughes, who was the head of Iowa State University, who had the foresight to bring an artist to this campus, not to teach, although he did later begin to teach and was a much beloved instructor here at Iowa State, but simply to create works of art for the campus. What a new and novel idea. He truly laid a foundation for what is now the largest public works of art on campus program in the nation. And the foresight of these early leaders at Iowa State to bring an artist to campus, to make works of art that would reflect the campus, inspire the campus, is an important thing that we've discovered.
And that went on from 1934 until about the 1950s. And then Iowa State forgot about the arts. And late in the 50s, President Hilton decided that we needed the larger arts, performing arts, visual arts, as entertainment and recreation, and hence the Iowa State Center was born. And that was a huge, pivotal turning point in Iowa State's history. The building of these 4 buildings down here really gave a full-blown impetus to science, agriculture, and the arts as being part of the core human functionality.
Well, I came back to Iowa State, or we both came back in 1966, after we both graduated from Iowa State and left. And I came back in the business office. At the time, the Iowa State Center was being planned, and I had the opportunity to work with President Hilton, who at that time had, retired and was really kind of leading the effort to complete the Iowa State Center and his vision. Wayne Moore, who was the vice president at that time, hired me, and Carl Hamilton, who was another vice president of university relations, were the 2 people involved. President Parks, who succeeded President Hilton, had a vision of expanding the humanities and the arts. And it's added a real dimension to Iowa State. I have said, as I've been connected with Iowa State over this 50 years, there are a few things you can look back on that say really had an impact on the institution. And I think the Iowa State Center, including the University Museum programs, is one of those. It really did change Iowa State. Sheeman was built as a continuing education building originally, and one of the foundation governors that had been involved was Henry Brunnier. He had been president of the Rotary International Organization back in this would have been in the 50s probably, and traveled extensively. And while he was traveling, his wife, who was with him, went off and went to museums and art places. Anyway, she started this collection of things, but they left their collection to Iowa State, and nobody really understood what was in it. When the Brunniers passed away, this collection arrived. It arrived in these trailers, and so through, I think, somewhat luck, maybe some planning, as I recall, Lynette Pohlman was a graduate student at that time and was involved in unpacking all of these boxes.
In the early development of the university museums, key people were Carl Hamilton and Neva Petersen. What a joy. There were many days where Neva, Carl, and I would plot out what was going to be next.
Dad knew nothing about art. And by his own admissions, he didn't know anything about art. But he was very dedicated to the mission of a land-grant university, and it's being more than just a place where you teach agriculture. He did have, I think, an uncanny knack for recognizing what he didn't know, but recognizing how to tap people who did know and to carry things through. And thus, his initial relationship and appreciation with Lynette Pohlman. I think he would be thrilled to think that she is still a major player in university museums today.
I came to the museums, I believe, and it was before there was a name for the museums. I helped Neva Petersen carry books from her retirement office across campus. From that, she invited me to a meeting with Carl Hamilton. It was the first meeting of the founding of the farmhouse as a museum, really the restoration of that. And the faculty went through the meeting, and at the end, after everyone had left, Neva turned to Mr. Hamilton and said, "Hire her or I'm not going to work." That meant she wasn't going to volunteer. And so Carl said, "Okay, what's she going to do?" And Neva said, "She's going to help me." And that meant not only that physical labor, but it was doing research. It really meant doing background research for the restoration of the farmhouse. But I just did whatever was needed at the time. And that was about 1971. And then in about 72, 73, there was this magic that was going to happen. It was a secret. And the Brunnier collection was coming. Didn't really know what the Brunnier collection was, but Mr. Hamilton asked Neva to help determine what was in these boxes. The boxes arrived in 2 semi-trucks.
Lynette had to take these pieces one at a time, unwrap them, and she had to document them with all the information you'd need when you have a collection like that.
And we started unpacking. And it was dolls. You never knew what it was going to be. The first thing we unpacked was opening a box, paper everywhere, and a round plate came out. And it was a Chinese cinnabar plate. We spent a year or more just unpacking one box after the other box after the other box, putting them on a shelf and discovering what these things were. You would unpack a doll, then you'd have a ceramic, and then you'd have a glass, and then you'd have jade, and then you'd have enamel. You never knew. It was Christmas every day. So it was about 30,000 objects when it was all said and done. And again, we had no idea what was in each box or what was the magnitude of that box.
There was a fair amount of debate about, do you put the museum program in Sheeman? Do you try and raise money to build a completely separate freestanding building? I happen to think, looking back, that it was a good decision to put the museum in the building here on campus.
My opinion is that it's been a success from day one, and I was there before day one. So I heard that they were going to have a gallery at the brand new then Sheeman building. And I walked over, because I live in the neighborhood, and I walked over, and Jack Don was putting up the Japanese dolls. And the day that I saw them set it up was memorable, and it's been that way, and we can compete with any museum. A very special place.
The Brunnier was scheduled to open on September 19th, 1975. And in July of that year, there was a major flood that hit the Iowa State Center. And this building had yet to be open. But the publications for the announcement of the opening of the exhibitions, as well as the football game that was going to take place that weekend, were already printed. So we had 5 days to move the collections from Hilton Coliseum to here. And literally, we got the last label up, the lights on, about 10 minutes before the doors opened and everyone came in on that evening. And we had a student, a vice president, and a wonderful emeritus professor. And we just didn't know any better. Naivete played to us very well. And we were able to look and say, what does Iowa State need? And then how do we evolve? From, I would say, 1971 until about 1980, 82, we were figuring it out. It was coming down the pike. Again, following Mr. Hamilton's notion of figure it out. We did not have what I would call a strategic plan for the museums. What we did have was what was best for Iowa State. So my roles related directly to that. It was a creation of job depending on what Iowa State needed with the facilities and the collections. How could we best use this? So, my first professional title was assistant director, trying to come to terms with this Brunnier space and turning over 24 exhibitions each year. And that role evolved then instantly into national accreditation and then into this explosion around campus. University Museums is fortunate to have 5 different entities. The Farmhouse Museum, the Brunnier Art Museum, Art on Campus, the Christian Petersen Art Museum, and Anderson Sculpture Garden. And they fit together for the purpose of first collecting, preserving, and educating with art and cultural artifacts. And we do that primarily through visual literacy. The farmhouse is the founding building on the founding site for Iowa State College and Model Farm. It's a very special place for all of us at Iowa State.
Neva and Carl, they were really, I would say, the godfather and godmother of both institutions. They meshed in kind of a partnership. Neva had the aesthetic and historical and kind of spiritual roles of first the farmhouse and then the Brunnier collections as they arrived on campus. And she convinced Carl of their meaning to the university.
Many things happened here that were day-to-day, but that were impactful, that changed the course of the university. And the people who lived here changed the course of the university. Tama Jim Wilson, Curtis, and Nat, for example. And those are the individuals for why we are a National Historic Landmark. But I don't want us to forget the anonymous faculty that lived here. At one time, the farmhouse was divided into a duplex, and different families lived on each side of the main stairwell.
My father was Associate Dean of Agriculture, and his boss, Dean Andre, lived in what we now call the Farmhouse Museum. So I kind of grew up on that.
Students labored here, but students labored all over campus. That was a requirement of being here. So they lived mostly up on the 3rd floor, and they chopped wood, they maintained the house. They also maintained parts of Curtis Hall by chopping wood and building the fire for Dean Curtis over there, which is very convenient. Curtis is 100 feet away from here. The other rooms of the house much reflect as it might have looked when Dean and Olive Curtis lived here. And we're glad to have been able to find at least about 20 original artifacts that date to that period that belong to the Curtis family. All the other objects and artifacts in the house and material culture are based on period works of art as well as furniture that would have been represented by Iowa State at that turn of that century.
It is an immersive environment for people to kind of step back in time and answer that call to history. I have such a great passion for the history, whether that is the early history of Iowa State, the history of Iowa during this time period. Different objects tell different stories, and it's about explaining to people the different types of objects and the different types of lifestyles that were going on in the Victorian era.
So the renovation of the farmhouse is also a restoration, and it happened from 1971 through 1976. It opened to the public on the bicentennial, July 4th, 1976, and has been a museum open to the public for student engagement and learning, especially in architecture, interior, and landscape, since that time. So what you see today on the inside of this facility is how it might have appeared in about 1910. Knowing that in that restoration period, from 1860 to 1910, there were over 17 different families who lived in this house. They range from farm managers to, we call them deans of agriculture, but they were really division deans, as agriculture was a division at that time at Ohio State, faculty, and students. When Dean Curtis came, this was where people came to do agricultural business, which was the primary business of the university in the state. The farmhouse was an entertainment space, a socialization, and a business center. And the south side of the room is incredibly important because that is really the site of the Iowa State's first library, business office, and classroom. In some of the early years, students came to Iowa State really to labor in the fields to get that practical experience education. And then on off times, they would then do what they called book learning. And that was located in that side, along with where the records were kept of the farm, the produce, those sorts of things. So when we look at Iowa State today, that has 1,900 acres and has grown from the 648 acres, and we had part-time students, seasonal students, no faculty or limited faculty because the farm managers and the deans were also teaching. Certainly faculty came along. But that's where it all happened until Old Main was built. This is the founding. To me, this is the expression of a democratic university that was really built on the labor and the intellect of the local farmers in this area. Because a land-grant college is about giving farmers and practical people an education to become professional. And that's where it first took place, in this wonderful transformed room that would have been the library, the business office, and the classroom of Iowa State.
What's fascinating to me about working at the Farmhouse Museum is that you get some very real, tangible history of the area specifically. First building on campus, you get to know how this institution was founded, because I think looking back 150 years, the idea of an institution being open to the entire public was pretty novel, especially for higher education. So I think just getting to learn that history and kind of being immersed in it at the farmhouse, it makes me as an individual appreciate that more and know that this university is continuing an over 150-year-old legacy to provide something to the public that's worthwhile.
Over the last 5 decades, about 1,500 exhibitions have been on view here in the university museums. Many of them have had guest curators and co-curators. Some of them have been faculty, some of them are scholars that bring new knowledge to us from all over the globe. We are very grateful for those folks who do that, and it really expands our intellectual content of the collection and the exhibition, and again, focuses on the educational curriculum of our campus.
My first experience with Iowa State University and the Brunnier Art Museum is probably one that I'll never ever forget, even down to the details of remembering what I wore that day and who I spoke to. It was really that transformative. In 1981, I was in high school and I was a budding artist and I was a 4-H'er. My work was displayed at the Iowa State Fair, and out of that State Fair experience, Lynette Pohlman curated a group of paintings and sculptures by young Iowa artists that were going to be in a show that traveled around Iowa to about 5 different venues. And my work was included in this experience and this exhibition. And I remember on that day speaking with Lynette, and she was the first museum director I had ever met. And I was just in awe of her and thought, this is really the first day of my life as a professional artist. But what I really didn't know was this is the first day of my life as a professional artist. And it began a lifelong relationship that I've had with the museum and Iowa State University. and one that has truly transformed and changed me as an artist. I think the one thing that I can remember from that day was thinking, I hope someday in my life that I'm going to have a show at this museum again, maybe a solo exhibition. And it took me about 35 years to accomplish that goal, but it really did happen. And in 2015, Lynette and curator Adrienne Gannett invited me to have a solo exhibition at the Brunnier, and I thought it was the greatest privilege of my life. It was an experience that really changed me in that it gave me the space and the opportunity to think about my work in a larger context and really put myself in an opportunity to explore the history of agriculture in Iowa and to think about how my work visually fit into this canon. And for me, that was just such a huge opportunity, just like the opportunity that I had when I was 16 and my work was included in the show that Lynette curated. So without a doubt, I can honestly say that these two experiences at Iowa State entirely changed my life. I think it's the golden thread that you don't anticipate that started so many years ago with Lynette including my work from the Iowa State Fair Show in a traveling exhibition that I could have never possibly seen how that thread would continue to weave through my life and continue to help me grow so much more as an artist that I could have never anticipated. I really never could have anticipated. It transformed me without a doubt. And I feel blessed and privileged to have my work in the collection. And I think that it is the thing that has, without a doubt, made me the artist that I am today.
Examples of memorable exhibitions include Land of the Fragile Giants, Albert Paley called Portal Gates. These are exhibitions that reach wide audiences but are very impactful for our own curriculum, but yet have gone on to be seen as impacted in the rest of Iowa and the Midwest region.
Well, I think the most memorable was just being astounded at how the Land of the Fragile Giants exhibit took off. Just totally astounded.
So it was a really incredible opportunity as someone who was just starting out, you know, in the world of art museums, to be able to see a project from almost start to finish.
And to have this bringing back of the use of my efforts back in such a strong way in thinking that these words were a part of the entire exhibit that was circulating the globe was just, it was almost miraculous.
Albert Paley, the Gates, that was an exhibition that she brought in, and I told her, don't ever do that again. The gates were huge and they were heavy. We talked to the engineering people about would the Sheeman floor actually hold the weight of the gates, and shoot through sheer force and a lot of luck, we did get it up, and it looked great. It was a great exhibition, but I tell you what, that was huge. Now that I know about Albert Paley, I see the gates, I see him, you know, I learned out a little bit more about him, and I understood that he actually made miniature gates, and I told Lynette more than once, if you ever do it again, bring the miniature gates in.
The last 50 years has been an ongoing expansion, from the first small room in the farmhouse to more recently the Laurie A. Jacobson Gallery in the Brunnier. Those expansions were all done to fulfill the educational mission of Iowa State in presenting our core value, and which is the objects that are in the permanent collections and all the stories that those contain.
So the reopening of the Brunnier Art Museum in 2019, it was really important for me because the new gallery, the Laurie A. Jacobson Gallery, was such a wonderful addition and such a change from what it had been before, and so much more welcoming.
Well, I was one of the leaders of the Capitol campaign and felt very strongly about the needs that we had both for a new entrance to the Brunnier Art Museum, additional storage for the art and artifacts that were part of the museum, and new gallery space as well as enhancements.
I was on the committee called Beyond the Glass, which was to celebrate the reopening of the remodeled space, which included the storage space, and that was a very exciting night. I think we figured out that there were about 800 people here, and that is pretty phenomenal.
When we opened that front entrance and all the guests saw the new renovated Brunnier for the first time, and just the gasps and the ahs, that was really fabulous.
I'd like to welcome all of the guests who have traveled from Europe, California, Texas, Massachusetts, and just across the street to be with us tonight. Everyone is so welcome, and I'm so pleased you're all here. 44 years ago tonight, in 1975 at 7 p.m., the Henry J. Brunnier Galleries opened. For all of you who are in the audience who had some part in this renovation, whatever it is, donor, laborer, enthusiast, sponsor, whatever, please raise your hand, and I can see you, so I want to know. Norman, raise your hand. Raise them high, folks. I know, I'm looking at you, I see you. These are fabulous folks. Give them a great round of applause.
And I want to thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate the reopening of the museum and the dedication of the gallery in Laurie's name. Because of Laurie's career, we spent a lot of time in museums. So that gives me some background in looking at what I see here today. And I can honestly tell you from my experience, the word I would use to describe this museum, it is a gem. And I think you should, and I think and urge you to visit and take advantage of all it has to offer. Its programs, its talks, its exhibitions, everything it has. Because when you think about it, whether you're a student, whether you're a professional, whether you're a retiree who's interested in the arts, you can walk in there and you might find something that can light your path, just as the museum lit Laurie's path.
In a few minutes, when we get our first look behind the glass of the newly renovated museum, the works of art on display will remind us that creative expression transcends our academic disciplines. Art is a vibrant part of the fabric of our land-grant mission, and the Brunnier Art Museum helps us to enhance how we educate, how we innovate, and how we engage our campus and our community. That is why this renovation project has a significant impact in how we are moving Iowa State University forward. It not only creates a more welcoming and accessible space for visitors, but it expands our capacity for high-impact, high-profile exhibits, and it will provide more educational engagement opportunities for our students. We are so proud of the work of the University Museums to enhance the value and meaning in all that we do to make Iowa and the world a better place.
Life at university museums has evolved over the last 51 years. In many ways, it's the same. It is about perseverance. We still do whatever it takes to get these exhibitions up and to get the audience here and to change lives.
Not a lot of people are going to think of Iowa State University as a public art triumph, but that's what it is.
The Art on Campus collection grew from Grant Wood and Christian Peterson's legacies of art development specific for this campus. It now numbers over 2,500 public works of art located across 1,900 acres, one of the largest campus public art collections in the nation. We also believe that is one of our educational avenues into getting into the curriculum of Iowa State. Some of these objects are new, newly commissioned, like Breaking Barriers down at the athletic complex. Some of them are much older, like Christian Petersen works of art. And those older ones need constant care. And as the collection ages, more care, maintenance, conservation, and preservation is needed.
The art on campus is just
the most exquisite experience. It's really a wonderful component of what makes up the university museums.
Artists nationally have wanted to be a part of the collection on this campus. And I think that speaks very well and is a very high impact statement, if you will, as to what this collection is all about and how it's been achieved.
The Art on Campus collection is critical in that many of the students and faculty engage with that collection first. It's the one that doesn't move. Most of these are site-specific, and so people become acquainted with them, and they also are legacy places, if you will, not only works of art, but people know where the Fountain of the Four Seasons is, and it stays there, unlike the museum exhibitions, which rotate constantly. So Art on Campus provides a sense of place.
Our campus is not just beautiful in the incredible design and layout of Central Campus, but in the art that you see throughout campus. So the Christian Petersen sculptures, art pieces that are found in so many locations around campus, but mixed with modern art that have been more recently installed. And the students see this, and they see that the campus is beautiful, that art contributes to that beauty.
I was already aware of the university's public art collection because I had been assisting sculptor Bruce White in the fabrication of the sculpture Carum, which is outside, it's a big blue geometric metal sculpture outside of the Black Engineering Building. So I was helping Bruce build that, and in 1995 I was commissioned to create the first commissioned artwork I had done for Iowa State University, which was for Ryman Gardens. And it's a sculpture called Dichotomy. And there's actually, it turned into a pair of sculptures. They're sort of not directly related to each other. They're both in Ryman Gardens. The other one's called Pediment. And then with public work, you have this, and it's ego-driven certainly, but you have this ability to affect the landscape. You're doing something, hopefully for the positive for your community or whatever community public work's going into. And you just reach a bigger audience.
What I discovered was that people in Iowa, at Iowa State especially, were so willing to engage with art and artists. And that was really made it easier for me because I wasn't having to convince people that they needed to pay attention to what I was interested in, and I was trying to pay attention to what they were interested in. So we had a really good conversation. One of the things that I have discovered about Iowa State's program is that they are amazingly committed and dedicated to incorporating artwork in all these different facilities.
And it is also an articulation of the values and the educational mission of each college and department and division from which it stands, because the very unique portion of Art on Campus collection is that it is curated by campus. More than 1,700 faculty, staff, and students have helped in the definition of the public art as well as to what it will be. So it really is the collection that is intellectually and emotionally owned, if you will, by our campus community.
With the Art on Campus collections, that happened in 1978, where 1/2% of the cost of a new building went to art. And that was shortly after the museum opened. And so Lynette immediately became involved in that. And there were new buildings being built at that time. And I think they started out with having people submit slides, that's what it was in those days. And then they selected artists from the slides, but it was chaotic. I mean, there were hundreds and hundreds of slides. And so eventually they then, very smartly, involved the faculty members of the buildings that were being built. And the faculty then was empowered and involved and became very interested in the art that was going to be commissioned for their buildings. And I think that was just a turning point in the art, and because then they had ownership of that art when they were involved in that. So I think that was a very important part. I think that really made a difference. And this campus is unique. It has outstanding art by outstanding artists.
The Art on Campus collection, compared to other collections within university museums, is different in that it is our more, I would say, like democratic collection. And it's not that myself as the curator decides everything that is on campus. It's definitely not the case. There's a tradition left over from Art and State buildings where every major project gets a certain 0.5% for art. So, for example, we just did a commission with the Jardine Business Building, and they had a committee that is created, and every committee is basically made of students, faculty, staff from that department, or the end users of that space and that work of art. The committee has a really direct say in what is being proposed, what is being accepted, and who the artist does end up being for that space. And you get a wide variety of different both goals for the public work of art or things that they want to highlight for either with their research, the student experience, things like that. So that's definitely interesting to see the wide variety that ends up in our collection because of how involved other people on campus are in that process.
I think about engineers who come to this college, right, and they have this one set path. And then they're exposed to all this art and they see things and it's different and it really transforms their perspectives, and I think it's important.
I believe that art is really another way to engage in a lot of different topics. And when art is incorporated in a lot of different facilities, you really get to see how art engages with different disciplines, with different kind of architectural styles and scenarios. And I think it really helps to show that art is really so fundamental to our lives and can really engage with us, not just as a separate activity where we might just go to a place to see art, but it really becomes part of our lives and the places that we spend time in on a regular basis. So on campus, because there's so many people who spend a lot of time on campus, I think that it's becomes part of a really important experience for people. Not only do they learn about art, but I think they learn about their environment and about the different disciplines through the artwork itself.
I always love art walk. So having somebody from the university museums, the curators, take you around campus and showing you our art on campus, or taking you through buildings and showing you the art that is within the buildings is just unbelievable.
When I'm doing a tour, I'm looking at how these works connect to one another and what kind of a theme can I build out of this and what's the lesson that they take away from it. And so my favorite one is to start at the Fountain of Four Seasons, where we can talk about the role of public art on campus and the history of public art on campus, which is important. But then as they look at, this is for visual literacy, so we're, how do you look at art, how do you interpret what you see, to have them look at the four maidens and identify the seasons, and then we talk about what's the shape. What's a circle? What does a circle do? It's infinite. So then we go over to the marriage ring and we talk about the cycle of life and the cycle of the family, and then seeing that the marriage ring is a ring and the children are the jewels in those. And then we go to border crossing, and at border crossing we talk about the hard work of moving forward and why someone would choose. And then we talk about the fact that it's sitting on an open space, heading north and heading towards the place. It's directed at the place where we study families. And then we go to forward. And go to forward and talk about where that is on campus. It is the busiest, as I understand it, it's the busiest sidewalk on campus, and where there's students going, and the fact that if you look at that sculpture, some people are moving west and some look like they're heading east. I mean, you can interpret it either way, but they're going somewhere, they're going forward, and there's effort involved in it. And then we say, and that's what you're doing. You're moving forward with effort to get to a better place.
I took my students on walks through campus because You can be in a classroom, and in my generation we were showing slides, but now it's PowerPoint, but that's all deception. It's only real when you see the actual piece. Then you know the size, then you know the texture, you know the color, you know a lot, and you can develop your visual critical thinking by actually seeing the work. So this was a very important part of the university.
I don't know if there are any as expansive and in scope as what's at Iowa State University. So certainly in the state, it's the single biggest collection of, in one institution of public art. It has to be, if not nationally, one of the largest or one of the larger ones. And so that's a tremendous asset, not just to the university and the students and staff and things there, but to the state as a whole.
I think the museums really reflect the value of not just art, but the value that the university has toward learning and knowledge and kind of the breadth of it. It's not snobby, and it's not meant to be elitist. It's meant to be accessible and meant to be, teaching as well as showing. And I think that is a really important aspect of how the museums, at least what I know of the museums there, seems to work. So, for most of the campuses that I've been on, Iowa State's collection is really up there at the top.
Art truly is about creativity. Art is about a level of excellence. Art is about understanding new ideas in different ways. And so art is part of Iowa State University having one of the most beautiful campuses in the nation.
In 2007, we opened the Christian Petersen Art Museum, which is a really fantastic opportunity to be involved with both the architectural development of that space, the analysis of use, making sure that it was flexible enough to meet our needs, and then all the way down to moving the Christian Petersen art collection from where it was stored in the Brunnier Art Museum over to the new space and housing it and making sure that there was programs and parties and everything was done to really kind of usher in that new facility.
Iowa State Christian Petersen Museum is the only museum in the country that is focused on public art. And one of the things that I think is really important about that is that there has been in the art world kind of a separation between the museum world and the public art world. Where the Christian Petersen Museum is so great is it really helps to bring the two worlds together. I think it shows that the process and the making of public art and all the various facets of it are worthy of exhibition and learning about in a museum context.
Sometimes the university museums can be thought of as a little bit of a treasure to be discovered on a campus like ours. So I'm thrilled that the Petersen Museum exists now in Morrill Hall because students access that with great ease. I think just by students passing the art on a daily basis, I think that impacts their lives. And they also have Christian Petersen, and Lynette has been very instrumental in preserving Christian Petersen, collecting Christian Petersen, and documenting Christian Petersen. So the appreciation of what happened in the 40s and 50s is evident on this campus too.
So the Petersen Art Museum was established to amplify not only Petersen's legacy as a great maker of art and a great teacher, but also to showcase those same things in other new public artists that are coming to our campus at the rate of anywhere from 12 to 15 per year, and that they magnify, again, the core work that Iowa State does.
Lynette Pohlman asked if I would create a work that would celebrate the opening of the Christian Petersen Museum. So I came up to the campus and I did drawings of the building. And then I decided that this wonderful neo-Romanesque, late 19th century building It's a great building in itself, but I would have the sculptures by Christian Petersen that are around campus come to visit the museum in the image. And so I also went around campus drawing the sculptures that are all over campus. So the engraving that I made is called Christian Petersen Sculptures, Visit the New Museum.
Lynette asked me to research and write an essay on Christian Petersen. And that's how our association began. We've published, I think, 3 monographs that are entirely about the career of Christian Petersen, and we've also published other books that have to do with Petersen in a larger art historical context. The Catalogue Raisonné, which is a full and complete listing of every work of art created by Christian Petersen, continues to grow. Even in this room, some sculptures that we simply didn't know about when we began.
It is the experience of Christian Petersen. To see that grow from falling apart artwork of his sculpture and his legacy, to seeing that conservation across campus, the expansion of the knowledge of his work and his place in American art history, to the research and the opening of the Peterson Art Museum, and then the Anderson Sculpture Garden in relationship to that, was truly a fulfillment of a really larger vision. And that's one example of how the vision has changed and evolved over time. Opening night of the Christian Petersen Art Museum, it was a big event. Many people attended. One person was a lady named Elizabeth Anderson, who graduated from Iowa State. She married her college sweetheart, Byron, and they went on to a life traveling around the world. He worked for Mobil, and wherever they went to gardens and they went to museums. And they went to museums because she was one of the final students that Peterson had. And even though she was a dietitian, she really appreciated the arts because of her experience with Peterson. That goes to his legacy of being a teacher. That evening, when we opened the Peterson Art Museum, she had come from Florida to be with us that night. And during the course of the evening, she asked, well, now that you have this done, what would you like to do? And I'd been thinking about a sculpture garden for a long time. And I rather flippantly said, I'd like to do a sculpture garden. And she asked a few more questions. Could that be done in a year? Sure, with funding. And a year later, maybe a year and 3 months, we opened the Anderson Sculpture Garden with this notion that it would have things from the permanent collection that included Peterson works of art, as well as some of our other contemporary artists that we have, and then a rotation of every 2 years of a contemporary public artist that is in the Art on Campus collection.
We opened the Anderson Sculpture Garden surrounding Morrill Hall, and that's important to kind of bring that art out into the environment that surrounds that space. It's a much more public space. Thousands of people walk on that sidewalk through the Anderson Sculpture Garden every day, and I've seen it grow and grow each year, which is really fabulous.
When I came to the Anderson Sculpture Garden, which was very colorful in the summer and all, and I walked back here and saw those 2 maidens that had been on Roberts Hall, the Christian Petersen bas-relief panels back here in this garden. Since I'd always loved those 2 maidens, said, this place just cries out for a quiet, serene garden, a place for students to come and read or just be quiet and have some downtime. And it's quite a contrast to all the colorful things along the walkways that are right behind us here. And so I talked to Lynette, and we came up with a plan and eventually developed this area, which I was pleased to hear students do use, and that it's often full of people. And I hope it becomes just a nice little quiet getaway. And it's nice that it's located so close to this museum entrance here, so that people do see it and know that it's here when they come in. And the garden itself highlights that also very special piece of art. So it's more than a garden.
The Peterson Art Museum, coupled with the Anderson Sculpture Garden, really formulates the support educational mission for the Art on Campus collection. So our campus really gets a sense of knowledge, as well as just awareness and physical accessibility of the art on campus. And then it magnifies what the artist is, what their themes are, and again, informs the curriculum. We have many partners in university museums, and in fact, that is our heart, soul, and mind. We often engage faculty just by going and asking them, what do you teach? What can we do to support you?
I really love the chance to inspire kids to look at art, to see how it is part of their history and their story and how it can be inspirational to them.
When we think about helping our students have a global perspective, art plays a very important part of building a global perspective, because art in itself brings different perspectives to campus.
We've been teaching visual literacy for decades, nearly since 1983, and we have used that terminology. It's always been core to us in our early years at the Brunnier Art Museum, as well as the Farmhouse Art on Campus. And so the Visual Literacy and Learning Program is a natural extension of why we're in this facility, because it really does enliven, expand understanding of not only the arts, but also of the disciplines. It teaches people to be visually literate, no matter what their topic is. And so whether you teach animal science, or you teach political science, or so many other things, we can teach visual literacy using the artwork as a resource, but actually then utilizing those same skill sets in their academic area.
Lynette showed me what visual literacy was and how important that is to the learning on campus, and how much the arts play into the educational program for the students, the books and the public works of art, and how they're used with faculty members in the classrooms. It was just unknown to me when I first came to Iowa State, and it's just a part of who Iowa State is, and I just think it's fantastic that university museums can play such an important role.
For visual literacy, it was more about opening up their eyes and their minds and how they can interpret and make connections between objects and the places and meaning. This is kind of a lifelong skill that they could take with them, and I think that they appreciated that.
I've been so pleased over the years to see how faculty have chosen to incorporate the museum's collection into a class or into an exhibition that they as a faculty member have really been the lead on, because they see the connection of that art, of that topic area that can be illustrated through a collection in the museum. They see that connection to what they're doing in their teaching program. It could be in their research program. It could be in what they're doing in extension. And so there is this great connectivity between the academic program, between our three missions, and the museum collection, and we see it demonstrated in many different ways.
This building we're standing in, Sweeney Hall, as I said, one, it was, okay, as an architect working with world-renowned chemical engineers, learning what they do was amazing, but also working with them on the art component of this and them developing what that meant to them. The symbology of the figure you see is very special to them. Every building you walk into, there's something that was put there intentionally. It wasn't just going and buying a piece and hanging it. It was, you know, the pieces that are here meant something to those involved with building the building.
I think what's truly remarkable about university museums is first their citizenship at the university, that this is an educational venue, that they are willing and able to help faculty tie the arts into their class.
So IE 348, the course covers manufacturing processes, welding, casting, polymers, and composites. And so what I've utilized the university museums for is the metal casting, because they have lots of art on campus which is created by the metal casting process. So after I go through that unit, they do a tour of the university museum, and often we've been coordinated that with an exhibit that's already going on, of a sculpture exhibit, for instance. And then the University Museum staff talks about how metal casting process is used to create the art that is on campus. And so the advantage of this for our students is it opens their eyes to the wonderful art that's across campus and makes them more aware of that. And the other advantage of it is in the spirit of lifelong learning, of them learning about metal casting from somebody who was arguably outside their field in the art field, telling them how metal casting is used to make the art. So I think it's good for them for lifelong learning of how they have other sources of information.
I think it's incredibly important on a campus like Iowa State University to position the arts as part of the larger conversation about what it means to be a well-educated student, what it means to be an artist in a setting where science and technology are so accessible. And I have always required, and to their great benefit, students to attend the educational programs and the exhibitions at the museum. They frequently come back and say to me, I didn't know this existed. And so I think our job is to make sure they get connected, and then they'll start coming on their own on a regular basis.
The most interesting activity I had with the museums was for my French 302 class, which is reading and writing in French. So the final exam is actually at the museums, and it's called in French Le Musée est à moi, or the museum is mine. And just presented in French the artifacts or the objects they had chosen. Art still has the possibility to open up doors and to build bridges between people, between cultures.
In the years I've been around, I've had the opportunity to, at least become acquainted with some of the students that come down here to either work with her in internships or whatever, and they go on, and there are many of them that have, become successful someplace around the country. And so you get a certain amount of satisfaction of knowing that Iowa State played a role in getting them started on their careers.
I was a work-study student at the University Museums from 1992 to 1996. It was an opportunity that I got my freshman year, first day of classes. And by the end of that first semester, I knew I was going to work in museums for the rest of my life, career. It opened up so many possibilities for ways in which I could help get people excited about the work that was on view and about the context in which it was created, the histories, all of it. And it brought so many of my interests together in a way that I didn't imagine was possible. I never thought about the idea of having a career in art museums. And so it was really that opportunity that opened that door for me.
I am thrilled to say that we have over, I think, 80 students who've worked for us that have gone on to museum careers, and yet Iowa State doesn't have a museums program.
The Pohlman Fellowship was really an opportunity for me to continue working with museums and getting museum experience that I needed to get a job in the field after graduation. The University Museums gives their interns really, really great experience that most universities don't give their students.
I love working with students, and that's probably, if I had to say, one of the highlights of my career. It's seeing students go on, and it doesn't matter what walk of life they go on to, whether they stay in the museum field or not, but to see them be successful, to see how their life continues. It's so much fun to follow their travels and treks and see how they develop from sometimes that very shy freshman to a very wonderful curator of an exhibition or of a museum.
So academic museums can give an opportunity for students at the school, whether they're art students, architecture students, or in completely different realms of study, to both see works, be inspired by them, but also have opportunities to work in the museums. So there's a real deep connection that academic museums can foster in its audience.
It's all about communicating with other people, and I feel like that can be difficult, especially now when everything's digital. So I'm just grateful to kind of been pulled into this world and appreciated and spend time with all of the students that interact with the art, the people that come in and teach about art, the artists, and the faculty at university museums.
The The conservation of our public art collection is often done behind the scenes, but each year we probably conserve maybe 3 to 4 major public works of art, like the Gentle Doctor or the Fountain of the Four Seasons, and many studio works of art. Since 1990, we have conserved all of Christian Peterson's major works of art and hundreds of his studio works of art. This is a never-ending project and one that goes on without a lot of public attention, but is critical to our educational and aesthetic mission.
But the need for conservation of public art is largely kind of overlooked and sort of understaffed, you know, so a lot of times the work doesn't get taken care of in the ways that it could or should. There's not a lot of expertise out there in doing it.
The major importance of conservation, I think, is giving due respect to the object and culture, and trying to hold and keep the artist's original intention that's always talked about alive. And I realize that ideas change over time and political stances can change over time, so how things are viewed and the meaning of them will evolve. But within conservation, at least if we can keep the integrity of the object intact from the artist's original intent, that allows the curators and the public, other people, critics, then to talk about other social issues. But without having that anchor of being able to see what the original object was, then it becomes fuzzy. You know, you lose detail. And I think detail is super important with most things, not just art itself, but more broadly in life. So in doing that with artwork, at least preserves that, and so the future can do with the object, you know, interpret it in the ways they will, but at least the original will be as close to, kept as closely as we could to the way we had found it. It's mostly preservation. Sometimes there's some restoration involved where we'll try and bring it back to the original actual tooling by doing little fills on and on, but at least minimally preserve it to the point where we found it. The collection, I think, is also remarkable because not only is it diverse with sort of a more traditional sculpture with Peterson's work and contemporary work, but really collections from all over the nation. So it's an extremely diverse collection, but one thing I wanted to mention is like one of the goals of the university that I respect so much, which ties into conservation, is how art education seems to be integral to the collection. Like the museums really pays careful, directed effort to integrate this into the curriculum, having tours also on site, which is really great for me because then I get to chat to people about the objects, how they were made, what I'm doing to them. And I think it gives a better understanding then of the value in a way and the social value of the object itself. Like is understanding how things are made, how they're constructed, how the environment affects them. So I became part of sort of the educational process to some extent, but I really respect how University Museums has taken this collection and made it part of the learning of this institution, which is incredible.
The conservators who help us with all of our collections and care and maintenance are critical in terms of preserving our cultural heritage at Iowa State. Without their knowledge and their expertise, we would not be able to maintain the 30,000 objects that we have for the educational mission of Iowa State. The University Museums has a large footprint on this campus, over 1,900 acres, 2,700 works of art, and 5 campus entities. We also have a large footprint that goes beyond the campus borders. We follow the land-grant mission, as is our role at Iowa State, and we do outreach exhibitions and educational programs. For example, twice the University Museums has been the center focus for going to the Iowa State Fair. What a privilege, what excitement. Each of those times, over 500,000 Iowans have visited via the fair, the art on campus, as well as what the museum does. And we've done such projects as Campus Beautiful, The Faces of Iowa State, and Art on Campus. While serving our outreach, we also enrich those communities in Iowa and try and bring our arts and culture that we want to share that are here on campus with all of those beyond the Ames border. The Land of the Fragile Giants is an example, a most memorable example of one exhibition out of the 1,500 that we've done that reached a huge outreach program. It started in a small western Iowa town of 150 people. It then went to 6 Iowa sites. It toured the nation, and then it toured internationally through the Art and Embassy program of the United States government. It ended the show at the invitation of the U.S. Senate in the Capitol Rotunda in Washington, D.C. Over 3 million people worldwide saw that exhibition, which was about the geography, the environment, the people, and the land of the fragile giants in Iowa. Again, small staff, big impact, worldwide outreach, land-grant mission. It's what Iowa State University museums are about.
So I feel very strongly that university museums, publications support the outreach and mission of Iowa State through telling the story in a narrative form of our history. I would just say it is a highlight of my career to be involved with Campus Beautiful, bringing together that incredible team of people that were just so dedicated to seeing this publication be the absolute best that it could be.
And so this book has been extremely important in raising that profile, that cultural profile of Iowa State University. In addition, it is a beautiful publication.
We actually have a multitude of different publications. We do both printed publications, and we have a long legacy of doing printed publications, as well as electronic or online publications. There's some major publications that we've done that I've been involved with, including Campus Beautiful, the Land Grant Act and the People's College publication, Christian Peterson publications. I'm working currently on an online publication that's the Iowa State University Biographical Dictionary. And so we're constantly trying to add to our scholarship base and add to the university's overall scholarship as well. Some of these have partnerships with guest authors, guest curators, or the library, and some of them are driven solely by university museums.
One of the things that to me is very important about e-museums is that it makes museums relevant. The fact that everything is documented and available, accessible online to every student, every instructor, every professor, and anyone else, I think is fantastic. We have an extraordinary set of exhibitions that just keep coming. We have classes for students in visual literacy. There are constantly new things going on.
Iowa State has that type of impact all over with its research. We also do it with our public art. We've helped many Iowa communities begin a public art program. We try and show them how to create these, in other words, the process, and then they are on their own then to continue to create those. Such towns as Perry, Fort Dodge, West Des Moines, etc. we've engaged with.
Lynette Pohlman came to Perry, and we had our stakeholders from our museum and our research facility come in, and she taught visual learning so that people could come to a piece of art and understand it in a better way than they had understood it previously.
I wanted the citizens of the state, in extension, to feel like they own a piece of this land grant museum. With every event that the university and I have connected and collaborated with, there's always the number count, and the numbers are just phenomenal in terms of people wanting this information, wanting this education, wanting this experience. But I think when I look at impact, I look at how have we changed the human capacity, how have we changed the social capacity within our community, certainly here, but I think of community as being the state of Iowa, particularly with land grant, and into the Midwest. And I think we have brought art to people, and people have had different encounters with art in a different way that speaks to their heart and their soul. And that's pretty hard to measure.
We continue this long tradition of sharing our collections and exhibitions through our outreach programs. We have many partners in that. Over the last 50 years, ISU Extension has been part of that through community docents. And most recently, we're touring an exhibition called Baragon, the Spiritual Master. That will start beginning this fall of 2024 and traveling for the next year to 6 Iowa sites. And we'll be talking about the architecture of Mexico and how it influenced not only Mexican architecture, but worldwide architecture. And we'll be reaching those 6 Iowa communities and their surrounding areas. Watch for the museum's collections to be perhaps in your neighborhood in the future.
To the audience who's going to watch this video, just go. You'll enjoy it.
University museums would not be what it is today without the support of visionary donors. Their inspiration, their passion that I have witnessed in particular, and I know from the many, many relationships and stories that Lynette has had and continues to have with those donors who believe in the value of art at Iowa State.
Many of our donors have been donors and supporters of the museums for many, many, many years. They have been with us through thick and thin, and we get to know them. A lot of ours is very one-on-one, and we just become friends with many of them.
I think it's very important that art be included in all educational structures for undergraduates and even for graduate students. I know that Lynette has often said that some of their strongest supporters are the people from the sciences and social sciences.
To be able to see how people have designed and made things that absolutely could not exist without chemistry, without mechanical engineering, without digital work today. They involve the execution of what their ideas were. The museum helps you learn. The artists show the creativity of what they came up with and how they executed it, but the university provides a learning environment.
The impact it's had, I think, has created a home for me here, and it's opened my eyes to the importance that the university has placed on beauty and on exploration and on diversity of thought. It's all encompassed in the art collection here.
It's all about growing. We're growing and developing as we're a part of this. I think that is the experience of an artist who's always growing, developing new ways of looking at things.
Now that I'm on the other side of things, I think it's so important to give back because I know how much it impacts students, how much it changes people's lives.
The University Museums has a tiny staff and a tiny budget, and they create magic every day in the wonderful shows that they have, the educational programs that they have, and what goes on here.
There's a source of pride for people who have had the opportunity to make donations to the museum.
One of the recent art exhibits that I love is Border Crossing, and you can see different things every time you look at it. It shows people in a very humble situation, almost a poverty situation, looking for a better life. I think sometimes that's why we come to a university. You know, we are looking for a better life, things that we're interested in, but we also learn at the university that there's a lot of diversity, and I think University Museums helps highlight that.
It allows students and faculty and others to become visual learners. And that's important in society and in business and in mutual relationships. It enhances the curricula that is taking place across the university, whether it's in the sciences or human services or human resources or agriculture. It has an impact, it's relevant.
Preserving what I remembered on campus and what people before me have remembered on campus is so important. And it's much easier to be prepared and prevent and conserve along the way instead of waiting until it's gone so far. So that's always been a really focus of where my gifts have gone.
It's so vibrant. There's always something going on. The staff does such a great job of planning the next exhibit and drawing people in, and so it's just fun to watch how active and extensive the activities are at the museum.
In this fast-paced world of what's all going on, how do we challenge people to stop and smell the roses, as my mother used to say? And on the other side of that, how might we that are a little closer to it, what might we challenge our thought process to do a better job of exposing Iowa State campus to the world?
When Maria and I went up there to do the walking tour on campus, just to look at the art on campus.
Just the two of us.
Just the two of us, and it was during the school year. We walked around, we went into many of the buildings, and we're all over that campus, and we were treated not only with respect and kindness from the museum staff, but the faculty that was there. We were in contact with the student body, a lot of them, and they were very respectful, and they, you know what, it meant a lot to us.
The depth of the art on campus is probably second to none, and we liked how it was being kind of brought forward and being important.
I believe that Iowa State has one of the best museums and universities in the United States. And so students, faculty, and people living in the Ames community are fortunate to have this quality museum in Ames.
Just by looking at all those in the background, they are just fabulous. And yeah, we are really blessed to have a university museum. And we have visited quite a few campuses at university, and I still think we have the best.
We, and I speak for myself, do not have the scientific skills and background and scholarship that people like the Topels have, and they bring that to us, and it makes truly the world of difference. And you can tell that those stories that they share are ones that are inspiring and move us all to want to contribute in a land-grant fashion to the betterment of the world.
I think it's important for us to thank Lynette, to thank her team for the difference they've made at Iowa State University. The work they do every day is truly amazing.
We're coming up on our 50th. The museums have grown. I think we've grown from some history of Iowa State planning to be an aesthetic place as the founding board thought it should be. And each of our moves as we've added on to the museums has been one that was focused on what is the need of Iowa State, what's the educational, aesthetic, and emotional need that the museums can bring and add to Iowa State University. So many people support programming, collections, care conservation, and why? And mostly it is to give back to the students of Iowa State, the contemporary students of Iowa State, to make a place for them that inspires them. It goes back to that 1858 idea of a beautiful place inspires learning.
Like so many wonderful things in Iowa, it's something of a secret sometimes. You have to let the secret out and tell people about it.
Well, our creator is the great artist, but life without art and beauty would be pretty sterile. And art and beauty reach down into education, and they provide students with a new perspective, and they are impacted by the enrichment that comes with life and beauty, and their world is enhanced, learning is enhanced.
It is everywhere at this campus, and it's so incredibly special. And I think it just opens people's eyes. It transforms their views. It transforms their perspective on common objects. Visual literacy was the big thing, and becoming visually literate is really something special.
As long as we can keep people interested, make those connections, have those relationships with people who appreciate what a fantastic thing we have here. There are people who will carry on the traditions.
One of the things that you can say is that at Iowa State, every person who comes has the ability to make their own mark on the campus in some way. And that continues to be very true. And those that are drawn to having that kind of hand-in-hand, action-oriented influence of driving their experience or their surroundings what that does is, especially for students, is they carry that outside.
People, I think, are availed the possibility to try to do their dreams. It's like you're not just a product, you're a person.
One of the goals of an educational institution is the constant battle against forgetting and ignorance. So it's difficult to explore this history, but I think we have to do it because then our present experience is enlightened and our future is given direction and inspiration. And that gives you hope.
If I were going to use one word to describe university museums, I would say the university museums are exhilarating.
Compelling. I think that what we do compels people to either re-engage with us or go off and explore on their own.
Oh, I think one of a kind.
Phenomenal. Because they are.
I would say passionate.
Dynamic. That's the first word that comes to mind, and the more I think about it, the more I think it applies.
Oh, I think the history of it is fantastic. History.
Vibrant.
Dynamic.
Integrity.
So the one word I'd use to describe university museums is impactful.
And I know I've said this word several times, transformative. The university museums and the public art collection transformed me. It literally transformed me.
Creative. It takes a certain type of vision.
Engaging.
I wrote some words down, but the one I stuck on was really cultural heritage, which I know is 2 words.
Inspiring. That's easy.
Magic.
I'm going to say elemental, because that's a word that I feel really tied to. And I think that it describes the museum in a lot of different ways.
Transformative.
Inspirational and educational, that's 2 words. It will help them maybe look at things differently. And for me, that's both inspirational and educational.
And my new word is relentless. But that's in a very good way. The 2 words that I'm going to use to describe the university museums is hidden gem.
And I said again, what you got here is a gem of a museum. So I would use the word gem.
Outstanding.
Collaborative.
Unique.
Awesome.
Lynette. For me.
Relevant.
I would describe university museums in one word as mission-driven.
Treasure.
Challenging.
I want to say community.
When I think about university museums, the word I think of is engaging. Excellent.
I'm going to say educational. I think she's broadened the dimension of people that have come through these programs over the years. The museums added dimension to people's experience in the educational area.
When I thought about it, again, applying my logical mind to it, I came up with the word synthetic or synthesis.
The one word that I would use to describe university museums is unprecedented.
Dynamic. And if I could add 2 words to that, it would be dynamic with meaning.
Well, I just said awesome.
And it is, you know, we both, and it was 2 words for me that came to my mind. It was overall, it's awe-inspiring.
So the first word that comes to mind is undervalued.
Learning.
I think the word that's most important to me when it comes to university museums is public.
My word to describe it is fulfilling.
Inspirational. I found the university museums inspiring on all levels.
Richness for me is the thing, it's the diversity.
Ever changing. It's all about growing.
University Museums is multifaceted.
Progressive. Progressive. It's moving forward.
I'd say treasure. Definitely, you know, in many ramifications of that word.
Fantastic. And I still think we have the best.
Unpredictable. Absolutely unpredictable. The collection is unpredictable in a wonderful way.
Awesome, extraordinary, spectacular, remarkable. It's just unbelievable.
It's a gift. We have been given a gift, and it continues that way.
University Museums in one word, superb.
My heart. 2 words. Over the last 50 years, the University Museums has blessed with many supporters, and Iowa State are all deeply grateful to many of them. This video is a recording for the documentation as well as the celebration of our 50 years. And I hope that you enjoy the stories from about 60 people that will be included. Know that there are only snippets of this, but the full recordings will be archived so that later, on the 100th anniversary, we can view the first 50 years as well as the next 50 years. Over the last 50 years, we've had over 2,000 faculty who have aided the University Museums in our educational mission and have helped us reach students in curriculum that brings intellectual as well as expressive quality to building them for better citizens of the United States. To those faculty, I am incredibly grateful for including them and us in the curriculum of Iowa State. Also by the numbers beyond the faculty, there have been over 1,200 donors after Anne and Henry Brunnier, who have built our collections, the permanent collections, to over 30,000 objects. We have had tens of thousands of people who have supported us through participation as well as financial goals. And without them, none of the exhibitions would have been possible. Each year, the University Museums presents over 14 exhibitions, as well as 100 public educational programs, creates 4 scholarships and publications, conserves 1 to 3 major public works of art and many studio works of art. We also employ students as interns as well as employees, and without their enthusiasm and passion, our work would not be as poignant as it is today. I'm also very grateful to the conservators, those unsung heroes that are behind the scenes, who work in their studio away, but sometimes in the public eye, who help us keep our works of art in good condition, preserving them, replicating them, caring for them. Without them, our collections would deteriorate, and the many stories that we have to tell and that are encoded in those objects would be lost. We are grateful, immensely grateful, to those unsung conservators who have helped us over time. Over the last 5 decades, the University Museums has been incredibly fortunate to have campus leadership who have been very encouraging to us and supported us throughout all of our endeavors. They have aided the museums in its growth and development and expanding from the farmhouse through to the Anderson Sculpture Garden. It was immense vision that those administrators lent to the University Museums over time, not just 1 or 2, but all of them. I'm especially grateful at this moment in time, at our 50th, to Dwayne Reeves. Dwayne was the proponent of this particular documentary video that will document some of our stories going forward, and he was the inspiration as well as the major support, and to Dwayne, I'm very grateful as well. The University Museum has been blessed with a magnificent staff. We've always been very small, but they're always very mighty. They've always been focused on the educational mission, the aesthetic mission of the University Museums, and they are passionate. They have given portions of their life, well beyond what is a career, to make the University Museums what it is today. All of Iowa State, and especially myself, are incredibly grateful to them.